Hello there. How are you doing today? I'm coming back with another fragrance review, and it looks like my cat's going to join me. So honestly, she's welcome too. She doesn't really like to join the cigar videos. She's not a big fan of cigars, but fragrances don't bother her, so she can hang out with us. So today, I thought it would be nice to review Encre Noir. And Encre Noir is kind of an infamous fragrance because it's somewhat affordable, but it's very polarizing. So people have very widely varied opinions on Encre Noir. Now, the reason for that is because there's a certain darkness to it, but also because there are aspects or facets of this fragrance which are almost downright unenjoyable to a lot of people. It's not a sweet fragrance. It has absolutely no sweetness in it whatsoever. It's not a floral fragrance. Um, Even the way that resins are used in it don't really introduce much sweetness. I mean, I'm assuming that there are resins in it. I don't know that there are resins in it, but it feels to me like there were some resinous materials included. And I think that those were dosed in a way to kind of introduce almost like myrrh, kind of a smoky, resinous facet, but not the labdanum side, not the styrax side, which become kind of sweet and almost a little bit floral, and perhaps even a little bit spiced. So more on the frankincense and myrrh side as opposed to on the sides with the sweeter facets. So, um, all right, so let's jump right in. I've prepared some notes, but also I want to go take a look at Fragrantica because I thought this was so interesting when I pulled it up. It only lists a couple notes. One is woody, aromatic, earthy, and musky. And when you go down to the actual uh, perfume pyramid that they have, there's only four items. It's cypress, vetiver, cashmere wood, and musk. And that's just so interesting because there's definitely quite a bit going on in this fragrance, even though the way that the fragrance presents is fairly linear. And I would describe this as a fairly linear fragrance. Um, and it's funny that it says cashmere wood because there's really only one material that produces that thought pattern in people. Yes, my girl, yes. There's really only one material that produces that thought pattern in people, and it's called cashmeran. Um, and when you spray Encre Noir, you get a cashmeran bomb. This thing is a cashmeran centric fragrance. That is the core of the fragrance. It is um, the most prominent note of the fragrance. Yes, it is. And it is really a cashmeran centric fragrance. Are there other notes? Of course there are. And we'll talk a little bit about those. Now, when I smell this fragrance, it doesn't smell very much like cypress to me. It maybe a little, but Ooh, are you okay, honey? But it's mostly vetiver and cashmeran. It's a cashmeran centric fragrance with a big note of vetiver, and it's got this coolness to it, a certain freshness to it, which leads me to believe some of the coolness comes from cashmeran, but it also leads me to believe that perhaps they played into that a little bit. Perhaps they added some kind of raw material like maybe helional, which has this kind of aquatic feeling. Um, Not aquatic like an ocean, more aquatic like a rain puddle, for example, or or things like that. So I think they played into the intrinsic coolness and freshness of Cashmeran and went for kind of like a dark forest vibe. Um, and perhaps there are materials like Mysorrel from Cinnarome or Mysore wood from Firmenich. Probably Mysore wood is more likely, given that the perfumer who made this fragrance actually worked at Firmenich, so she would have access and experience with all of those materials. But that's basically like a very woody, textured sandalwood material, which would make sense in this because the the fragrance comes across as kind of smoky, woody, um, and damp. So there's also something kind of like bitter or acrid in this fragrance, and it's reminiscent of this bitter note is almost reminiscent of Dior Fahrenheit, and I think it could be a material like Amber Rome Absolute from Cinerome. Now, I'm sure that Firmenich has a material that's very similar to this one, but basically it gives this almost kind of like a tar quality, and it kind of would make sense in a myrrh sort of space. And as I was mentioning earlier, this fragrance has kind of a little bit of a myrrh facet. So this could be adding a little bit of darkness. It's funny, it smells almost like burned rubber. And when I was reading the reviews, somebody said it smells like a Nike shoebox in the middle of a wet forest. So that could be part of why people are getting that impression of like, the synthetic rubbers and foams that are in the shoes, etc. Um, and I have a feeling that, Encre Noir, black ink, um, that burned rubber smell that I get from Amber Rome is part of what's creating the ink accord that I think was used in this. And there's kind of like a leathery accord happening as well. It's possible that a material like isobutylquinoline, which has this kind of um, it almost kind of smells like pine, which is another reason it could be used in this, like the sharp green, which is also present in galbanum, which in theory could also be in this fragrance due to the kind of cool icy quality that galbanum has. This is kind of a ramble at this point, but um, anyway, isobutylquinoline is commonly used in leather accords, and it creates this kind of outline at the bottom that a lot of times leather materials don't have. So, kind of gives shape to the leather accord, which is pretty interesting. Now, I guess it's time to talk about the vetiver note, which is very smoky and rich, and it's one of the centerpieces of the fragrance. It's one of the most obvious, the loudest, and the most extreme qualities in the fragrance. And it's pretty likely that most of that is coming from a material called vetiveryl acetate. Um, I don't have vetiveryl acetate, but I do have a material called cypriol, which is kind of like a similar material to vetiver. And this does kind of sit in that space. I also have a material I didn't bring out called spikenard, which is a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more woody than vetiver is. So I brought out cypriol because cypriol is a little more similar, but um, that will kind of sit in that space, kind of in the center, and create some of that smoky, fuzzy haziness that is so nice. And it kind of smooths out the cashmere and actually brings the cashmere into that smokiness. Um, which has kind of a masking effect because cashmere almost comes across as slightly grainy. And so the smoky vetiver is very nice in terms of blending that so that it's not so obvious. But I think there are some mild woody materials used. The cashmere, Iso Super, which is a nice fresh material, kind of a blue, slightly blue woody material. And the vetiveryl acetate come together to create this kind of nice, thick, slightly woody scent in the center. Um, there are also some slightly ozonic or possibly even some like terpenoid materials, which would kind of lend to the forest aspect after a fresh rain. I think that the perfumer was sort of playing on this combination of materials, which create this image of black ink, this kind of leathery black ink, animalic black ink accord. Um, and then also on the other side of that, playing with this kind of smoky, woody accord, and they come together to make Encre Noir. Um, so those kind of ozonic and terpenoid qualities could be present to enhance the petrichor effect, and petrichor is the smell when it rains. So some of that smell comes from jasmine, and if you dosed it very lightly, that would actually fit pretty well into this fragrance. Um, and the interesting thing about this fragrance is when I smell it, I don't get a lot of citrus. Um, it comes across a little bit more ozonic to me, but um, like pretty much all men's fragrances, it does have limonene, it does have linalool in it. And I have even seen some fragrance reviews for this one that call out a mild citrus smell which burns off, and then what remains behind are just the kind of masculine facets that linalool can impart. So, um, what's the lasting power? Is it strong? Is it mild? The fragrance is somewhat strong. The projection is not nuclear, but it does project. And, the lasting, I would say it's got some pretty good materials in this, which should cause some lasting effect. I think you might get 6 hours out of it where you're actually smelling it, which is pretty good, especially considering the price is very low. Um, and so I think at the price you can get this fragrance for, it's actually quite quite an incredible value if you like a very dark and kind of serious fragrance. And I think you can dress this fragrance up, but I think it might be hard to dress it down. It doesn't feel very casual to me, and it doesn't feel very lighthearted. Um, but it also doesn't smell exactly like an office scent because of how dark it is. So I'm not too sure what the application would be for it. I don't use it very often. I think that's probably part of why. It's not a very good date night fragrance. I think I might wear it to a museum or something, or I might wear it to like a cigar lounge, or if I was going to be, maybe at a speakeasy. I don't know too many other scenarios where I'd really would wear this, to be honest, and um, it doesn't feel like it would be very enjoyable to wear it in high heat. So I'm thinking kind of fall, cool weather times, or when I'd probably want to break it out. Um, yeah, I think it's a great fragrance. I hardly ever use it, and I do like dark fragrances. There's almost something that smells like a peanut in this, which is a very strange. I've never smelled that before when I smelled it. Something vaguely nutty about it. There is a material called Newsate, which has a kind of a woody facet and is slightly nutty. Anyway, we're getting on a tangent now. Um, I'm not exactly sure when I would wear this fragrance, which is funny because I like dark fragrances. And I go to places like cigar lounges pretty often, and I think I could pull it off there. But the problem is that this bottle is at my house, and I would have to drive home and then drive back to the lounge, and that's not realistic. So um, it just doesn't get used very much. But I think it's a tremendous value. I would not really call it a safe blind buy. But it's so cheap that you may not regret doing it. But yeah, I think it's a great fragrance, especially from the perspective of somebody who is kind of like making perfumes. It's fun to smell things that are very kind of stark and dramatic and stand out in the fragrance world as different, especially at a low price point. Um, I'm pretty sure I got this fragrance for $28, $30, and I don't even think I bought it at the cheapest that I possibly could have. So it's a phenomenal value, um, solid performance. And yeah, I do recommend it. You just have to know what you're getting into. You have to know that you're signing up for a pretty dark, kind of intense, and not the most approachable fragrance on earth. And as long as you know that, what you're going to get is a huge dose of one of the most interesting materials in perfumery, which is cashmeran. And I think the name is funny. To me, I don't smell cashmeran. It's a dark, woody, musky, wet material. And I love to use it when I'm trying to make petrichor fragrances for that reason. And I do think that it's very intelligent perfumery because typically what people do with cashmeran is they introduce it when they're trying to make like the name throws them off, the name cashmeran. They throw it into stuff that's like trying to be like soft and fluffy, and it doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't really work for me. And cashmeran is commonly used in oud accords as well, so people will toss it into the middle of these like kind of woody resinous um accords, and to me that's a little strange because it has this cooling facet, almost smells a little wet, and that's not what I want when I'm going for like a sweet resinous oud. I think it's one of the reasons why Western perfumers have such a hard time blending oud fragrances is because we believe that cashmeran is this phenomenal material for um, oud accords, but then it just kind of like makes things feel cold and wet, and then that wants us to go towards like fresh and clean, and like that's what Western fragrances are. They're typically fresh and clean, but like Middle Eastern fragrances that use oud are like dark and smoky and resinous, and then they have like rose notes and florals and things like that. But um, anyway, cashmeran I think was used very well in this fragrance. And this is the way that I would use it. I would use it as a kind of a woody, wet, clean, fresh, foresty, petrichor, that kind of thing. That is the way I use it. And it was interesting when I smelled this fragrance, it kind of was almost like a yep, on the right track, kind of like a confirmation, because this is a good example of perfumery that uses that material in that way. So if you're an aspiring perfumer, I would encourage you to use that material in that way too. That's what I intuitively lean towards, and this is a good example of that. But before I talk your head off all night, I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, go ahead and subscribe and like and share with your friends. Whatever you do, leave comments. I love reading comments. I love responding to comments. Um, I'm gonna give this fragrance like kind of a low versatility score. I think it's not very versatile, maybe like 4 out of 10. The value is phenomenal, 8, 9 out of 10. And the performance is quite good, maybe 7 out of 10. I think at this price range, that's definitely fair. So thank you so much for watching. Um, please come back again and we'll continue on with more fragrance reviews. Thank you so much. Have a lovely night. Bye bye.